So here is the beginning of our presentation on audience, code switching, and rhetorical strategies. So what is this? Well, when communicating, such as writing or speaking, in any situation, we all do something called code switching, which is we alter the message we send based on the receiver. To use just one example, we use a different tone, different words, etc. when we speak to our parents versus our grandparents versus our friends versus our boss versus a police officer, hopefully. We also alter aspects like word choice and punctuation in different types of writing that we do. For instance, in a text message, think about the different messagings being communicated in these examples. Greetings, hello, hi, hi, hi. We alter information based on who the receiver is, and this is something that we all do automatically for most situations. For this class, I'm generally asking you to write to a formal audience. The audience requires a different tone, different word choices, and different expectations. Thus, code switching for the purposes of this class refers to changing the approach to the communication to suit the audience. Keep in mind that the code switching outside of this class can refer to multilingual individuals switching between two or more languages. Any alliteration to our message that we implement is a rhetorical strategy. As Mack 2016 mentions, the rhetoric is the machinery of the essay, the stuff that makes it go. You can find this on page 10. Therefore, the word choices, the tone, the level of explanation, the evidence, the types of argument, the argument types, the rhetorical appeals, the sources, and the other tailoring that we do with our message to suit a specific writing situation are all examples of rhetorical strategies. Tone can change how a piece of writing comes across. It can be casual, formal, angry, humorous, and so on. The tone in essays for this class should generally be formal and academic. For the large research assignment at the end of the term, the tone and writing style will be informed by the type of text that you choose to write about. Don't worry, you'll learn more about this later on in the term. For example, the tone of a newspaper is very different than that of an informal blog or a humor website. With most words in the English language, there are multiple ways to express the same thing with different levels of formality. For example, you have compatriot, friend, buddy, automobile, car, ride. These levels of formality are all appropriate and effective under different circumstances. With our friends, most of us would never use the word automobile because it isn't appropriate for that audience. However, with an academic audience, please make sure to avoid the word ride and words of that similar level, although the other two words, car and automobile, are okay. This can, of course, be taken further with varying levels of synonyms. How about équipage or jalopy instead of car? How about confidant or familiar instead of friend? Generally, the most important advice is to stay consistent. Shifting between casual and formal language in a text can be disorienting and choppy for readers. Altering the format alters the message sent. Imagine the formatting of these rhetorical situations: a poem, a grocery list, an academic essay, a Facebook post, a tweet, an Instagram post, a meme, an article on CNN.com, an article on the San Antonio Express News. These are all different types of text that are formatted in different ways, and the formatting is not interchangeable. Imagine writing a grocery list like a poem. My aunt's a poet, and I bet she would probably do that. Academic writing usually comes with the expectation of a formal formatting like standard APA, MLA, Chicago, and so on. This functions almost like wearing a suit to the office, if that is the expectation. It implies an understanding of the conventions and expectations of academia. By contrast, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and board shorts to the office is usually not appropriate. Similarly, by using APA formatting for a personal letter or a Facebook post, it's not appropriate, just like wearing a suit to the beach isn't appropriate. Therefore, choosing the appropriate outfit for the appropriate situation entails using APA format for academic essays in this course. Just so you know, your class notes has links to the instructor guided videos for APA 7th edition formatting, and you can access the Al Purdue guide and week 3 class notes as well. In academic writing, contractions should generally be avoided as they make the writing more informal. Just write out the words instead. It is instead of it's, do not instead of don't, so forth. Another way to code switch or adjust to an audience is in the content of the writing. For example, let's say that the writing, let's say that the writer is writing about a hobby of theirs, say skateboarding. They've been a skateboarder since they were 10. They read about skateboarding. They talk about skateboarding with their friends. They skateboard every single day, and so on. In short, they're an expert on skateboarding. If they're going to write about skateboarding, they have to decide what the audience they're writing to. Are they going to write to some subset of fellow expert skateboarders, someone who's just starting skateboarding, other college students, parents of tweens who skateboard? Depending on whom they're writing to, they have to adjust their content. For example, mentioning special terms like front pop shove it or nose manual to a skateboarding audience requires no explanation, while a more general audience would require explanation. I have no idea what those terms mean. If they were writing to my grandmother and her friends who are in their 80s or 90s, they might even have to explain what a skateboard is. Therefore, it is very important to keep the audience in mind when writing anything. What information do they need? What level of language or formality is appropriate for this audience? How much explanation do they need? What knowledge do they already have? What assumptions do they have? With what points do they agree or disagree with you, and so forth. So make sure you don't go too broad with the audience. A common mistake when choosing an audience or analyzing someone else's audience is to go too broad. The audience for an essay or an article can never be Americans or everyone or adults or tech users or similarly broad audiences. Something like social media users would never include billions of people around the world. Many of them would speak or write in different languages, so they could not be part of the audience. Many of them would be too young to have mental capacity or language ability to read something too advanced for them. Even among, say, social media using American adults in their 20s, the differences in education level, belief, social, cultural, political, religious, would make them too diverse and large of a group to write for. People are simply too different in terms of education level, knowledge about a topic, age, interests, politics, beliefs, and so many other factors to target them all simultaneously. When producing a text, the audience is narrowed in various ways based on code switching, the publication, and so on. Let's consider an article on a recent film, for example. A brief review on a newspaper site is different from an in-depth analysis on an online film magazine, which is different from a peer-reviewed article on a film or an industry article in something like Variety. These all target very different audiences. Similarly, even a general audience article would have to be different if targeting my tween nephew versus my elderly father versus me, a middle-aged college professor. And yes, that's the first time I've referred to myself as a middle-aged college professor, and I don't like it, and I don't want to do it again. These audiences all have different levels of education, knowledge, interest, and expectations, and it would be impossible to target all three of these audiences without making the writing too general and ineffective. My nephew might read the article on Tiger Beat or watch a YouTube reaction video. My father might read the article on his local newspaper website, and I might read the article in an academic journal or something like The Atlantic or BuzzFeed, let's be honest. Think about how different these articles would be even if the topic is the same. Next, you want to choose your audience with care. Depending on the assignment, factors like age, gender, education level, income, political affiliation, interest, geographical location can all factor in. Therefore, you are not addressing the whole person, but rather some aspects of a person. For example, not all readers of a publication are the same, but they converge on the publication for some common reasons. Therefore, each article targets some subset of characteristics of the broader readership. When looking for the audience of a text, look first to the readership of the publication. Who reads the publication in broad strokes? Then look at who among that readership would read the specific article. There are parts to the rhetorical situation which are audience, purpose, and context. Audience is the intended recipient of the message. Our assigned readings weren't necessarily written with comps 2 students in mind, so you aren't always going to be the audience. Remember that whether a piece of writing appeals to you personally isn't automatically the measure of its effectiveness. Bear in mind, too, that the answer to who's in the audience for a text can never be everyone. Even variations like everyone who uses the internet or everyone who owns a car don't work here, since a text can't effectively be written for an audience that broad. Purpose is also what the writing sets out to do: persuade, analyze, illustrate, entertain. Context is the form that the writing takes. A newspaper editorial is quite a different context from a magazine article or a blog post or a Facebook status update or a text message. An APA 7th edition formatted essay is a different rhetorical situation than a newspaper article or a Facebook post or a tweet or a grocery list or a business email or a personal email. You're getting the point? And then finally, we have ethos, pathos, and logos. Aristotle's rhetorical triangle and its concept of ethos, pathos, and logos, which is rhetorical appeals, are also important components of an argument. Every argument contains some measure of all three. We'll spend more time with these later in the term, but here's a brief overview. Ethos is ethics. This appeal to our ethos and credibility. How trustworthy is the writer as an author on this subject? How do they display their knowledge of a subject? Why should readers trust them? With your own writing, why should readers trust you? Pathos is emotion. It appeals to our emotions. How do writers appeal to the emotions of readers in their writing? Is it patriotism and pride, joy, sorrow, pity, values, so on? And logos is logic. Appeal to logic. Is the argument logical? Is it logically presented? What kind of supporting evidence is the writer using? And that's it for this one today. Most of this information came from Mr. Dahl Hanson's 1312 Week 1 weekly lesson plans from his previous Composition 2 class. So I hope you enjoyed it.